Hello and welcome to Chapter 11, Biosocial Development in Middle Childhood. Middle childhood is going to span from about 6 years of age to about 11, but honestly it should end with puberty. And so I put puberty there even though our textbook gave us a year, because people vary on when puberty begins. This end point for middle childhood will vary depending on this biological change that's going to happen. But we'll talk about puberty in the next section of life. So for right now, we'll be talking about middle childhood. All right, well, let's get started. Let's begin like we did with early childhood, talking about how much the child typically will grow per year. So you're going to see again about 2 to 3 inches of height gained per year and about 4 to 6 pounds of weight per year on average. Kids vary, but these will be average amounts that you would expect to see every year between 6 and puberty. Again, it's going to persist in the cephalocaudal and proximodistal patterns, where development starts at the head and works towards the tail, and starts in the center and works towards the extremities. So that's going to continue through this period of life. All right, so let's talk about nutrition during this period. In the US and actually pretty much worldwide, obesity is on the rise. Pretty much in cultures where people are industrialized or industrializing, obesity is on the rise. So here's a chart from our textbook, and it shows the prevalence of obesity, and this is going to be between 2 and 19-year-olds. So, this is like all of childhood, really, not just the age bracket that we're talking about. The blue bars are boys, the orange bars or amber bars are girls, and then they've broken it down by ethnic group. So we've got non-Hispanic whites, non-Hispanic blacks, non-Hispanic Asian, and then Hispanics. And what you're seeing overall is that they're, for non-Hispanic whites and non-Hispanic Asians, the obesity patterns are pretty similar for males and females, or boys and girls. But for non-Hispanic blacks, girls are much more likely to be obese, and for Hispanics, boys are more likely to be obese. So there are some sex differences in certain ethnic groups in the US. Now this I got from a study that was reported in the New England Journal of Medicine, that there are two different kinds of things being reported on these two panels. So let's look to the left panel to start off with, and that's the probability of being obese at 35 years of age according to the person's current obesity status and their current age. So the blue line on the left panel is among people who are not obese at initial testing, and in the red line it's people who were obese at initial testing. And what they found is that people who were not obese when they were measured at 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years were less and less likely to be obese at age 35, whereas people who were obese at 5, 10, or 15 years were more and more likely to be obese by the time they were 35. And if you make it to, let's say, 15 without being obese, your probability of being obese at 35 is significantly less than if you were obese at 15. So the weight pattern that a person has in adolescence is a really good predictor of their weight pattern at 35. Now, if you look at the right-hand panel, what you see is according to BMI category. And if you recall, BMI is a calculation of a ratio of how tall you are and how much you weigh. And it doesn't really take into consideration musculature or anything like that. So it's not perfect. There are different BMIs for males and for females, but other than that, it's not very specific. But what they've done is they've broken the participants into the purple line, which is normal weight or underweight at the time that they're measured at 5, 10, or 15 years of age. The yellow line is they were overweight at that when they were initially tested. Red is they were moderately obese, and then blue is they were severely obese. And what you see is that people who are normal weight or underweight have a much less likelihood of being obese at 35. And again, more and more likely to be normal weight when they're 35, the older they are when they are still normal weight or underweight. And then it's inverse. If you're overweight, moderate, or severe, you tend to stay in your own category. Notice that those lines don't really cross for the age 35. But you see this significantly elevated risk of being obese, still obese by the time you're 35. So just things to worry about. For the age bracket that we're talking about, the 2 to 6 year old, it's really important to talk about, I'm sorry, the 6 to puberty area, it's really important to focus in on, entering adolescence at a healthy weight, right? Like that's the goal. And as our textbook talks about, it's not really about calorie restriction and things like that with children. It's about healthy food and then adequate activity. Like that's what we want to strive for. Now, why is obesity on the rise? Well, one thing that people have pointed out is heredity. The idea that, well, I mean, maybe people have inherited tendencies towards gaining weight. But that's kind of a hard argument to make. I mean, it's a good one to make if you're looking at the panel that I'm showing you right now, either of these panels, because it shows for an individual who has whatever heredity they have, whatever they are displaying when they are between 5 and 15 years old, they're probably still displaying that same thing when they're 35. So it kind of implies, well, I mean, maybe it's a set point that's based on heredity and that you can't really do anything about it. But the problem with that explanation is people's, like, populations' genes have not changed dramatically in the past 50 years, but obesity has changed significantly in the past 50 years. So it's probably not entirely heredity. Each of us individually, we have our own struggles that are heredity contributes to that, our individual struggles. But as a group, when we're saying that on average people are getting heavier, it's probably not entirely heredity. So what about parenting? One of the best predictors of obesity in adulthood that we can say from things happening like specifically in childhood is that people who were breastfed are much less likely to be obese in childhood, in adolescence, and then later on in adulthood. Breastfeeding seems to help protect against the development of obesity well after breastfeeding has stopped. So what I thought would be really helpful is to let this nurse explain to you exactly why breastfeeding is thought to have this protective mechanism to help people from becoming obese. So I'll let you watch her video and then I'll see you on the other side.